uniqueness about this, I am a fan of history. I love biblical history, church history. I've read a lot of the church histories, the church history of the fathers. It is one of those readings that's several volumes, and you only read it when you want to know it, because it's not one of those you read if you want to stay awake. And so I love this. Acts is just that. Acts is really the history of the church. Acts 1, Jesus ascends to heaven. Acts 2 is Pentecost, and we have the mighty start of the church. And from there on, through the book, we discuss and we find out things about different aspects of different churches. Church at Rome, at Corinth, and all the rest of the epistle churches. We continue through the book. Two main characters in the book: Peter, beginning of the book, who was sent to deal mostly with the Jews and building the church. And then comes along Saul, who has changed his name to Paul, God says, and he's the latter part of the book. Now the reason I mention all that is because the passage that we read is really historical in one standpoint. It's about a lady that actually lived, and it's interesting because when we look at this, two names are given to her: Tabitha, which is the Hebrew Aramaic name, which all Jews would have had some name of that standpoint. And the second name comes from a Greek aspect, and normally Jews wouldn't get that second name. They'd just keep their Hebrew name and be called that. The thought train is this: she probably had some wealth and influence. Again, nothing says she was married, nothing says she had children, none of those things. But she may have had some wealth, she may have had some influence. But it really, in some ways, is not the big issue. The big issue that I want to talk about today is simply the next phrases. Because they're only spoken of one person in Scripture this way: her. Not spoken of anybody else. She was full of good deeds and charitable works. That phraseology is only found of her. And I want to speak from this standpoint. If we forget history, we'll be in trouble. This is a great historical message for us not to forget. I don't know about you, but I'm sort of terrified of the generations that are coming up because they're forgetting history. And it sort of kind of bothers me when I see those things because they're forgetting these. And so as we look at this lady, this little phrase, this is all we have on her. It's not a lot, but it's powerful. When I mention Bill Gates, what do you think of? Money. Unless you're a computer geek and you love Microsoft, you think of money. When I say Mother Teresa, what do you think? Good works. All kinds of things. If you've read anything, she was involved in all kinds of things. When we mention her name, it's like, oh, okay, who's that? In fact, this is one of those passages with teenagers, if you ever read it and you go to the Greek word and you say Dorcas, they like to just run with that and go, oh, she was a Dorcas. And negative term for teenagers. But she had a powerful testimony because she was full of good deeds. Now think about her good deeds from this standpoint. When she died, women, widows, wept. The thought train that I come away with is probably this: they probably wept because she was supplying them. They brought their tunics and garments. I mean, think about it. Just this, what she did with that. Friday night, there's a second Friday in Mesa. And it's supposed to be a family thing. There's supposed to be booths, all kinds of things, and food and all kinds of wonderful things. So I told my wife, I said, well, let's go down there. And so we went down there, and there is such a thing as the second Friday. It's not nearly as big as it was advertised. It was a nice walk. And so we walked through it and got all done. I said, well, let's go get something to eat. And then when we got done eating something, I said, let's go. And I knew where there was this little mall where I had bought tennis shoes. I said, let's go over there. I said, there's got to be something we can look at. So we went over there, and we walked by. You know, we went to Nordstrom's, and we went to Penny's, and we went to Lane Bryant, and we went to Dress Barn. We went to Dress Barn, and we finally went to Old Navy, and you say, why are you doing all this? Because we went to all of those, and we walked about a mile for all of this, and and a little thing, good job, you got lots of steps in and all those good things. And we bought 2 dresses for my wife, one she's wearing, and we bought 2 dresses in an hour, and honestly, it only took us about 5 minutes to find the dresses. You say, what's the big deal? We bought those dresses that quick, but Dorcas made everything by hand. There was no Lane Bryant or pennies, and there was no singer to set your foot on and sew with. They sewed everything by hand, and in most cases they made their materials. And so when she says she was full of good works and she made tunics and clothes, it wasn't just, I went, last Christmas we bought all the underwear for the people. Really wasn't that hard. We went to a place and bought them and brought them, and they loved them. Imagine if we had to make all those. I'm afraid most people would be going without underwear. Because we're not really good at that. And so she was full of good works that people cared for and people loved. This was her testimony. She had a tender heart that said, boy, I'm willing to do these things. And there's nothing in this that says she did it for her own gain. One of the things that I see from this historically is for us making sure that we're teaching our youngers. Teaching them how to be servants. I told you when we started, the Mother's Day event for us was a big deal because it was a great opportunity to teach young men. I grew up with a dad who basically would let me do, I could do almost anything and not get in a lot of trouble. If I disrespected mom or a lady or anything like that, my life was in my own hands because you never knew if he was going to let me live or not. Because that just was unacceptable. You just didn't do it. And serving was something that was just sort of ingrained in us. In fact, so much that someone, yesterday my wife was talking to someone and they were talking about how, remember our big Easter service? We had the big Easter service over in the activity center. When we got all done, we basically put all the tables up, all the rollers on that, did all that work, set everything up. It looked awesome. I mean, we were done. One of the ladies who works here that watched everything was saying how awesome it was and how impressed she was with our church. Then she said, and there was this little girl who was running everywhere and anywhere, and wherever people pointed her to, she did what they told her to do, and she said, oh, she was just a little servant. You say, why? She was my granddaughter. Now, I don't say that, well, yeah, I do. I say it, I'm proud of her, but I also say it from this. She comes from lots of people who served. It was just ingrained in us. We were ingrained to serve, and my dad cut wood. He always had. He always had enough wood on hand at the end of the summer for 2 winters. The reason he did was if someone needed wood, he had wood to give to them. That's just what we did. And so, full of good works. I think it's important. Now, having said that, it's sort of like this is one of these days where you're preaching to the choir. Because I know the good works that go on here, because I see what we do with our funds here. And one of the things that does happen when we get to be older is our ministries change a little bit. I love to walk. So I walk a lot. In fact, my adopted Filipino daughter, she's really not adopted, but for 6 years she was in our church over there, and she moved over here, and she's, I don't know if to say conned or at least talked me in and challenged me to see if I can lose enough weight and get in good enough shape to run a half marathon with her in October. So that's the goal. So we'll see if I can do it or not. But I say that not to say that keep prodding me. If you want, that's fine. I am really trying. But I say that for me, walking and running is a great opportunity to pray. Man, when I walk, I can be praying for everybody. The list that we have, I go down there. I pray for all of you. Now, I will have to admit, there are some of you that I have to pray this way. 3rd row, 4th seat over. Yeah, I remember him, just don't remember the name. But it's a great thing to do so we can pray. And so sometimes our ministry does change the way we can do things. But one of the things that doesn't ever change in this church when we talk about full of good works is what we give and what we do with it. the church does good works. And for me, this is one of those things that you've heard me say, and you probably hear me say this over and over again, because I just love to say it and love to do it. I love to talk to my pastor friends and say this: the average age in our church is about 75, and the next thing they say is, "Oh, you're dying." Here's the reason they say that. Statistics say when you have an average age of a church that's over 70, it's going to fold. That's just what statistics say. And then when I say to them, "Oh no, we run over 100 in the summer and 300 in the winter," and I said, "and we give away 70% of our budget." I love that one because it always gets silent on the phone. Because there's not a church out there. There are some charities out there that don't give away 70% of the money they get brought in. And so we should be thrilled at what we do here from that. But it's a legacy that she leaves. She was full of good works. She did good works in such a way that it was like, we look back and we remember what she did. She did charitable acts. And one of the things that I try to do with our kids is I type up stories. I have to also admit I have a dragon speak, so I speak to stories a lot of times. And I put them on my computer so that our kids will have those stories. Because they're not going to know them someday. Someday they're going to be gone and there will be no more stories. And they won't know about my great-grandfather or my grandfather. And they go away. And some of that, the reason is because of this. My stories are 100 years old maybe. They were passed down. This is 2,000 years old. The principle here is still important. Having good works. Now understand, good works don't get us to heaven. We get to heaven by the grace of Jesus Christ and His work alone. It's not ours. But James also tells us good works are proof of that grace. That when we do that, good works show. And again, it's not a battle of who does more works. At the end of the day, all I want to hear is this: "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." That's the what I want to hear. And so, the good works she had were so much so that when she passed, people wept over her. They wept because she was gone. Now, here, my take on this: they wept because they realized what they were losing. See, there's not a lot of people that step up and have that type of thing. There's not a lot of people that have that servant's heart, or that are willing just to serve others and to help others. Because we live in a time where we're becoming more and more selfish. We're just me, and losing some of that. So when I look at this is extremely important from that standpoint. That this is a historical lesson that we can teach and that we can pass down, and this is a wonderful story of her because, now granted, there's some real cool things in the fact that Peter got to raise her from the dead. I mean, reading the book, right, in fact, someone had loaned it to me, it's people who went to heaven and came back. And reading that, it's like, wow, I think, talking, what did you see? Did you see my mom and dad? Who do you see up there? And leaving that attitude of being a servant. It is such a wonderful testimony. And that's really what I want to leave with us. Now, everybody's right now going to really think something, because that was sort of the end of the message. I know one guy back there is going, "You're setting a bad precedence if you're stopping now." Here's the deal, though. This is the Paul Harvey time. In 25 Mother's Day messages, I've done this 3 or 4 times. And we're going to do it today. And it's a little different. Here's what it is. Everybody in here, no matter who you are, had a mother. Just had to have had a mother. If you didn't, you're an alien. I really do want to talk to you. And so what I want to do right now is spend a little time giving thanks. It could be 30 seconds. It could be a minute. Whatever it is, just remember those things. And I'll start. and I will get a mic that we can pass around in case you don't speak loud. But when I grew up, I listened to a lot of rock music. From the 70s, that's just what I did. And there was a song that said, Mama's all right, Daddy's all right, they're just a little weird. Dad was not weird. Dad was the one that kept the family together. Mom, weird. Real weird. And here's the other difficulty about it is, when it came to the passing of the genes, I'm sure they said I needed double portion of weird. So I got a lot of the weird parts. Couple things. Number one, we had annually, usually once or twice, food fights in our house. Always started with mashed potatoes, always happened in the summer, and the way we always knew we were going to have a food fight was this: Mom would take her mashed potatoes and just start swirling and then put more butter in them. Mom always started food fight, and Dad would always sit there and try to eat his dinner. And lo and behold, when we thought it was all over, Mom would always take the in Dad's face. Then Mom would suddenly walk out the back door, because our kitchen was right by the back door, walk out of the back door, turn to the left, go over 3 feet, grab the hose, turn it on, walk back inside and say, you guys are always dirty, and start spraying everybody. So now our food fight went from a food fight to a water fight inside. When I was young, it was fun. When I got older, I simply figured out how to end all this. I would just grab my mom, throw her over my shoulder, walk into the bathroom, turn the cold water on, and then stand in the shower. And Dad would always smile because he would hear her screaming about the cold water. Mom was a little weird. My mom's idea of a 7-course meal was this. You start with red licorice, green jelly beans, your salad. The next 5 courses were chocolate. In any form. Didn't really matter. She didn't care. The weird thing is, my dad was a diabetic. My mom wasn't. Mom was a little weird. When I grew up, every kid wanted to come to our house. I wanted to go to their house. I didn't get it. And it wasn't until I was older that I finally figured it out. Mom was weird, but here was the cool thing about Mom. If a kid came to our house and said they were hungry, we ate like a feast. Because Mom, we had a 3-acre garden, and we had 2 freezers full, and we had canned meat in the basement, so everybody ate. So eventually I figured out people came to our house because my mom was a short order cook. If you didn't like what you were getting, she made something else for us because every kid left. Coming back to what we just said back there about Dorcas, my mom was full of good deeds. And she passed that on to me. We passed it to our daughter, and now we have a granddaughter. So it can be as short as you want. If nobody says anything, we are going to leave early. If you want, it's open to anybody to say whatever you want about your mom. I will bring the mic to whoever wants to speak first. And Lord, we are so thankful for the privilege to pray for these people, and many more, Lord. We are thankful that you gave us this wonderful tool to use, to honor you and to seek your name and to see you answer our prayers. We're so thankful that you taught us how to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. May the Lord bless thee and keep thee. May the Lord let his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. May the Lord lift up his countenance unto thee and give thee peace. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen.